Traders, if the cascade concepts from last time have you chaining together those multi-link setups like a pro, spotting how one break tips into the next for those 300-point Bank Nifty runs, then it's time to fractal up. Those chained reactions are powerful, but what if you could zoom in and out, seeing the same patterns repeating at every scale like a fractal in nature? The cookie cutter stuff like flags or wedges, they're fractal basics now, scaled up by algos to trap the masses. To fractal dominate Nifty and Bank Nifty through 2025's FEI frenzy and expiry chaos, you need advanced price action concepts that fractal across time frames. The self-similar chains where small patterns scale into big profits, revealing institutional fractals in every zoom. I'm trading core, and in this masterclass, we're scaling 5 all-new, under-the-radar price action concepts for the Indian battlefield. The Fractal Scale Break, the nested Wick Fractal, the Recursive Range Scale, the self-similar Fade Fractal, and the Zoom Chain Fractal. No cascades or echoes here, no triggers, ripples, or layers from before. These fractal with self-similarity, where patterns repeat at small, 5-minute, and large daily scales, showing how institutions fractal their positions for scaled edges. We'll zoom into the psychology scaling each, why they're fractal shadows, overlooked by most, exact scaling spots on bear charts, trade scales from micro to macro entry, NSE risk scales for 400-point Nifty swings, traps that fractal your drawdown, and fractal confluences to multiply scales. Pure price, no overlays, just multi-time frame views on Kite or TradingView. Let's scale in. Understand the fractal core in Nifty and Bank Nifty. Patterns don't change with Zoom. A 5-minute break fractals to daily structure, letting institutions scale orders across frames without tipping scale. Advanced because it demands dual view trading. Retail sticks to one time frame, missing the fractal repeat. Trade with 0.5% risk scales, scaling into 9:30 a.m. micro triggers or 2:30 p.m. macro cascades when fractals align. The edge? Scale the pattern, ignore the small, and the big fractal misses you. Starting small, the Fractal Scale Break. The Fractal Scale Break scales a break from micro to macro, where a 5-minute break of a swing line fractals to match a daily line, chaining a scaled breakout across frames. Core is the self-similar line. Draw from recent micro swing, see it align with daily fractal, same angle slope. When micro breaks, the daily fractal confirms, scaling into a 100 to 500-point run. Why advanced? Breaks get traded in isolation, but this scaled version fractals institutional alignment, where smart money breaks micro to test macro liquidity, scaling the chain. Psychologically, it's illusion of control. Retail breaks micro and chases. Institutions scale the fractal to chain the trap. Spotted on 5-minute Bank Nifty for micro, daily for macro. Align lines, micro swing line mirrors. Daily slope within 10 degrees. Micro break with candle close beyond. Fractal if daily line chains the same direction. Enter on micro confirmation close scaling the break. Stop beyond micro line, 15 points, targeting macro line extension or 3-to-1 scaled. Trap to scale past, isolated breaks. Filter by line similarity, or it's random. For NSE, scale risk to 0.3% on micro, full on macro confirm. Confluence with nested wick scales the break, fractaling 64% into dual frame runs. On Nifty, this scales morning micros to afternoon macros, fractaling the session. Scaling to the nested wick fractal, this nests wicks inside larger wicks, fractaling a rejection that nests smaller rejections, scaling into a nested reversal. Nested because the big wick contains smaller ones at the same proportion, e.g. 1/3 size, self-similar like a fern leaf. Advanced as wicks nest across scales. Retail sees one wick as noise, but the nest fractals institutional rejection. Nesting stops to scale the flip. Psychology nests deep. It's layered doubt, the outer wick traps, inner ones nest the cascade, scaling fear into reversal. On 15-minute Nifty, spot the outer wick, 2 times body, nest if inner wicks at 1/3 length, self-similar inside. Enter on nested close opposite the wick direction, stop beyond outer tip, 20 points, targeting the nested proportion reversed. Avoid single wick nests, requires self-similarity, proportions match, or it's loose. Risk scale at 0.4%, partial on inner nest confirm. Layer with recursive ranges for nested power, fractaling 61% into 200-point nests. Bank Nifty's high wick days nest this, scaling into close fractals. The recursive range scale recurses ranges within ranges, where a small range recurses inside a larger one at the same ratio, e.g. 1:3 size, scaling a break from inner to outer. Recursive because the inner range repeats the outer's shape, Ciuciata's proportion, self-similar like a Mandelbrot set. Underrated as ranges nest but don't scale. This recursive version fractals institutional buildup, recursing orders from inner test to outer release. Psychology recurses the weight. Retail trades inner break and gets stopped. Smart money recurses the scale for chained liquidity. Traded on 1-hour Bank Nifty for outer, 5-minute for inner. Align ratios. Inner 1/3 outer size, shape. Inner break recurses if outer chain's the same. Enter on outer confirm close. Stop at inner range, 25 points. Target recursive projection, outer size times 2. Pitfall, non-recursive nests. Check proportion match or it's box-in-box noise. NSE scale, 0.5% risk, trail to inner high. Confluence with self-similar fades recurses the scale, scaling 60% into 300-point recursions. Nifty's weekly recursions scale this, chaining into monthly fractals. Self-similar fade fractal. Self-similarly fades a trend across scales, where a micro fade small pull self-similarly matches a macro fade proportion, scaling the reversal. Self-similar because the micro pull's shape-price ratio mirrors the macro, e.g., 61.8% retrace, fractaling exhaustion. Advanced as fades scale multi-frame. Retail fades micro and gets run over. Institutions self-similarly scale the fade to chain distribution. Psychology self-similarly erodes. Micro doubt self-similarly scales to macro capitulation, fading the trend in waves. On daily Nifty for macro fade, 15 minutes for micro, match proportions. Micro retrace equals macro ratio. Micro self-similar close fades the trend. Enter opposite on macro confirm. Stop at micro high, 20 points. Target macro fade depth. Dodge non-similar fades. Require ratio match or its drift. Risk 0.4%. Partial on micro scale. Stack with zoom chains for self-similar power. Fading 62% into 250-point scales. Bank Nifty's trend fades self-similarly, scaling into corrections. Zoom chain fractal. Zooms chains from micro to macro, where a 5-minute chain of 3 candles zooms to match a daily chain pattern, scaling continuation. Zoom because the micro chain structure zooms identical to macro, same number/length links. Underrated as chains don't zoom. This fractal version scales institutional momentum, zooming micro tests to macro runs. Psychology zooms confidence. Microchain zooms retail buy-in. Institutions zoom the scale for chained liquidity. On 5-minute Bank Nifty for microchain, daily for macro, match zoom, micro 3 link equals macro structure. Microchain, close zooms if macro chain same. Enter on zoom confirm. Stop at microchain low, 25 points. Target macro chain projection. Pitfall, unzoomed chains. Check structure match. Cap at 4 links. Risk 0.5%. Trail on zoom link. Confluence with fractal breaks zooms the chain, scaling 59% into 400-point zooms. Nifty's daily zooms scale this, chaining into weekly fractals. Fractal your routine. 9 a.m. Zoom scan dailies for lines and ranges. Hunt 5 to 15-minute micros in volume windows. One fractal per concept, log the scale. These fractal plus 27 are monthly, scaling with pros. Top fractal, scale break or zoom chain? Comment below. Like, subscribe. Trade with discipline. See you in the next video.